And there we go. That's the old BBC sounder, which is part of my life and love. So on our special weekend editions of Interesting Ideas, I kind of like to play it. It just makes me feel good, and that's important. It brings back good memories, and good memories are important. Well, today I'd like to talk about, and perhaps even bring some other thoughts to you, about the 5 fears. Now, I'm only going to talk about one of them. But in the book that I wrote over 20 years ago, which is on the subject of marketing you, personal performance marketing, we called it. And the fear was the fear of having nothing important to say. You see, oftentimes when I encourage people to build a platform, take the stage, and market themselves through their personal performance, even when I invite them to come onto the radio programs, they say, well, what would I say? Or if I would do a podcast, what would I say? Well, can I tell you the story from my book of some time ago and perhaps introduce you to somebody who might help you? Years ago, William Shakespeare said that all the world was a stage, and each of us had many parts to play. Many years later, in the 1950s, Irving Goffman wrote a very influential book entitled The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. And in this classic work, Goffman showed how each person plays dramatic roles in how they present themselves socially in all their relationships and professionally in all they do in their work. Recently, this is, remember, 20 years ago, recently, Joe Pine and Jim Gilmore have taken the model even further. In their book entitled The Experience Economy, Work is Theater, and Every Business is Stage, they describe how the present economic environment has moved from products and services being what we offer to clients and prospects to a marketplace that requires us all to provide experiences for them. They claim that almost all products and all services have been reduced to being commodities. That means there is no substantial difference between the products and the services being offered at competitive levels. Now, you all know that. Pine and Gilmore then assert that if we want to have a competitive edge, we must create experiences that people find delightful, of value, and increase their choices and of personal significance. Now think about that. Now, fundamental to their analysis is their prescription that in order to create experiences of value, we must understand that our work is theater and our business is a stage. Now, their analysis, along with the insights of Goffman and indeed the wisdom of Shakespeare, can help you as an aspiring entrepreneur, as a business leader, in 2 distinct but related ways. You know, because most people in what they do have fallen into the dilemma that Pine and Gilmore describe. They have become mere sellers, products, services, just like everybody else. And, of course, these commodities, they can be bought and sold by anybody at any place. These people have nothing unique to offer and no compelling experience or added value that makes their work or their service unique. You're just like everybody else. Because of that, they have nothing to say when they approach potential clients. They sense it. Yeah, and in some cases, they know it. And that is why they are afraid. They fear that they will be rejected, neglected, and discounted because they have nothing different or important to say. But you see, there is more, and this is part of personal performance marketing. Since we all are on stage in the experience economy, we need to give increased attention to how we speak our parts to the audience. That's right. Clients and prospects. Think of them as an audience, not just prospects or clients. They're your audience that we seek to attract and influence. But at this time, most advisors, most people, most entrepreneurs have had no training or coaching in speaking their parts. They have no strong scripts that describe their work and what they are really good at. They have not had any help in learning how to use the phone, the mass media, how to give a group presentation, or to truly know their roles and how they can best play their parts and speak their lines. Let me assure you that if this describes you, you are not alone. Unfortunately, the vast majority of aspiring entrepreneurs and business leaders often find themselves at a loss in knowing how to describe themselves and how to answer the simple question, what do you do? Now, let me just take it aside from my book. Just yesterday, I met a gentleman in our office here, and he told me that he's in the computer supply business. And I said, yeah. Oh, by the way, how are you different from everybody else? And you know what? He didn't know what to say. And I'll tell you at the end of this what I actually said. Okay? Now, here we go. Back to my book again. Many of you do not feel confident in describing the work you do and how you are unique and different in your performance. That's right. But like every good actor or performer, you need to know your part. You need to know the right cues, and you need to know what to say. You need to know how to ask questions in a way that is compelling, inviting, and attractive. You also need to describe your work and the work you do in ways that causes people to ask you questions. And you need to reach people at deeper levels of their experience. Much of what personal performance marketing is all about is getting better at what you do and then knowing what to say, how to say it, when to say it, so you can attract and influence the clients and prospects you want to select you. They want to select you, not just your product, not your services. But until that time, many of you will still be fearful of having nothing to say. But you know what? But with time, hard work, and good coaching, things do not have to stay that way. So I challenge you to take Pine and Gilmore's dramatic model very seriously. That's right. Start thinking this way. You have to be on, and you have to perform for your audience. They are clients and prospects. No, you don't have clients and prospects. You have an audience, and you want the audience to grow and go, and you want them to become fans of you and recommend you to others. You must find ways to attract that audience, delight them, sometimes even entertain them, creating memories for them and communicating in engaging ways that motivate them to work with you. You make the difference. From now on, remember, this program is a performance guide. That's what I called my book. It's a performance guide. And that's what you need. You don't need a book. You need a performance guide to viewing your work as theater, your business as a stage, and the role you play as central to your success. But also remember that performing does not mean faking, play acting, or pretending. In fact, just the opposite is true. You'll be called to perform with purpose, power, poise, clarity, self-assurance, and a heart for service, because that's what you are becoming and what you are. Just let those thoughts sit on your head for a while, and we'll be back. Well, we're back. Now, what we love to do on our weekend edition of Interesting Ideas, from time to time, we'll tell you a story talk about some important, interesting person, and then if we're lucky, we'll call them up and they will comment on the program and perhaps do whatever they want to do. As I say, a comment, maybe a critique, maybe a response, or if they just want to talk about something else, they can go with it. Joe Pine, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Stan. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Well, it is a pleasure. We have known each other for many, many years, but that's not part of the story.
Right, but people who know you should ask for the story, right? And people who know me should ask for the story of how we met and reconnected.
Absolutely, because it is a very interesting story. Maybe we should do that sometime, because it was kind of providential, wasn't it?
It absolutely was.
All right, well, let's do that sometime. But Joe, you started the whole deal of the experience economy, and I was working on that, and you scooped me. That's part of the story. But then you were kind enough to help me out when I wrote my book on how to market yourself, and the people just heard that presentation. So the rest of the show is yours, my friend. Go.
All right. Well, thank you. I loved in your book and in what you recorded here how you focused on theater. Right? It is such an important point for businesses to understand, particularly small businesses, which we could get into. But every business needs to understand the importance of theater and being on stage. I love, Stan, how you started with Shakespeare and then went to Irving Goffman with his presentation of self in everyday life. I can remember when I first started talking about theater and business and theater and work, that people would sort of think I'm crazy, and they'd sort of say, you're going too far. I said, well, what do you mean too far? I'm only talking about work. Goffman talked about life, and all of life is theater. And of course, that's what the famous Shakespeare quote is all about. And I love too, Stan, that you use the exact right term, model. Right? So often when people talk about us talking about theater, they talk about it as a metaphor. And it's not a metaphor, right? It's not work as theater. Literally, work is theater.
And you had to remind me of that, didn't you?
I wasn't going to say anything about that.
Okay, yes, you can continue now, but I confess.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, that's right. When Stan first, read our stuff and got to know him, that he did refer a few times to theater as a metaphor, and so I did correct him. But you got it right? You got it right in the end, which is theater is a model. It is a model for work, about how companies should treat work, about how workers, employees should be on stage again with customers. And it flows basically from the core model in our book, The Experience Economy, which we first came out with in 1999, and which is when, just before that is when we reconnected, Stan. And then we re-released it, we got it for the third time in 2020, and where the original subtitle was Work is Theater at Every Business Stage. And that's core. And the core model in there is the progression of economic value, which talks about how economic value has changed over time, both on the supply and the demand side, where in the beginning were commodities, the basis of the agrarian economy, which lasted for millennia, and then we shifted started in the late 18th century into an industrial economy based off goods. Then in the latter half of the 20th century, we shifted into a service economy, and today we're in an experience economy. An economy where experiences have become the predominant economic offering. And experiences are what consumers and increasingly business people want today. And the most important thing to understand is that experiences are a distinct economic offering. As distinct from services, services are from goods. It's basically when you use goods as props and services as the stage to engage each person in an inherently personal way, and then create that memory as the hallmark of the experience. That's what experiences are. And I'm not going to talk about all the examples, but you can think of all the classic examples like concerts, plays, sporting events, If it's in movies, radio, TV, theme parks, and now you have all these new wondrous genres of experiences, both in the real world and in the virtual world. But in every case, the economic function that you're doing, we determined, my partner Jim Gilmore and I determined is staging. You're staging an experience. You extract commodities, you make or manufacture goods, you deliver services, but you stage experiences. All right, what does that mean? Well, it means that you intentionally design all of the elements to come together into a cohesive whole that then engages each person, reaches inside of them, and creates that memory. Right, and in the end provides time well spent. Right, that's what experiences are, is time well spent. So staging is key, and both Jim Gilmore and I can remember the conversation we had long ago as we were writing the book, and where we talked about staging, and that was the right word to use. That's what companies are doing. And then one of us, and neither one of us can remember which one, but one of us said, well, then if you're staging experiences, then work must be theater. And the other one went, exactly. Right, exactly. That when you're staging experiences, work is theater. And again, not a metaphor, but a model. That whenever workers are in front of customers, the audience of the experience, they are acting. Whether they know it or not, whether they do it well or not, they are acting and must act in a way that engages the audience. I love a quote from Peter Brook. He's a very famous theater director out of London. He wrote a number of books. One of the little tomes he wrote is called The Empty Space. And the opening line of that book, he says, I could take any empty space and call it a bare stage. A man walks across this empty space while someone else is watching him, and that is all that is needed for an act of theater to be engaged. Right? That's what theater is. It's basically one person watches another person work. And that's why work is theater. And in fact, if you allow me, Stan, I sort of rarely do this. I think it is a little odd, but given what we're talking about, I think it's appropriate today. I want to quote myself.
You're on.
All right. On page 143 of the latest edition, Experience Economy, competing for customer time, attention, and money. Right, Jim and I wrote this paragraph. I probably should memorize it, but about once a year I want to quote this paragraph, and this is a perfect time. We write, in the emerging experience economy, any work observed directly by a customer must be recognized within the dramatic structure of the performance as an act of theater. Indeed, flight attendants and hotel staff routinely perform acts of theater when they direct patrons to the nearest exit or hotel room. The work of retail store associates is theater when they straighten merchandise on a shelf. Bank tellers, insurance agents, and real estate brokers engage in theater when they explain terms and conditions. So do cabbies when they converse with taxi riders. Your costumed UPS route driver performs an act of theater with every package he delivers, and FedEx's overnighting is absolutely positively theater. Watch your food server the next time you dine out. The taking of orders, the placing of dishes, the bussing of tables. It's all theater. Selling, whether the salesperson pitches automobiles or bottles of perfume, is theater. A presentation by an ad agency to a client's marketing manager, after all, is an act of theater. Doctors who perform surgical operations in an amphitheater also perform theatrical operations by the side of every patient's bed. But how differently and more memorably would all these activities be performed if those executing them understood that their work is theater and acted accordingly? Right? That's key, is that you need to understand it. So therefore, as a business owner, as a individual business person, and whatever, that's just read in that paragraph, right? Whatever job you have, whenever you're in front of customers, you need to act accordingly. So you need to understand some basic acting principles, which is, first of all, you have to direct your workers to act, right? Direct them to act, and then give them a role to play on your business stage. So you have to help them characterize those roles, whether it is the costumes they wear, whether it's the props that they use, the names that they have, the scripts that may be written out in full or in outline, whatever it is, you have to characterize them to act. Then they have to act with intention. You know, I use that word when I talk about the function of staging. In fact, I just wrote on our own website a thoughts post, right, on our blog about intention in business. And it gets into theater and actually goes beyond that to understand globally what intention really means. But at the core is your acting intention. It's the reason you're doing this particular thing in the way that you're doing it, right? A basic understanding of theater and a basic distinction between services and experiences is how versus what. That what is the functional things that you have to do, right? Flight attendants have to direct people to exits. Retail associates have to, straighten merchandise. Cabbies have to get you to your destination. UPS drivers have to deliver packages. That's all the what. It's the how you go about doing that can turn any mundane interaction into an engaging and memorable encounter. So act with intention, which is whatever you're performing, whatever task you're performing, understand why you're doing it and how you're going about doing it. So it's basically perform task in order to what, right? What is that intention that you bring to it? And when you fill your work with intention, not only will you give a great performance, but you'll have a much better time doing it as well. And the last principle I'll mention is you need to enact dramatic structure, right? Dramatic structure is the flow of an experience over time. And in most companies, they're sort of afraid of dramatic structure, you know, whether it's like a call center or again, in a retail store, dramatic structure has to rise up to a climax, has to overcome these obstacles. And all of that is bad, they think. But no, if nothing much ever happens and you have a very flat dramatic structure, that it will never be memorable and it won't rise to the level of an experience. So, dramatic structure, theater people, if you go to theater class, you'll learn this, what's called a Freytag diagram. It's from 19th century German performance theorist Gustav Freytag, who was the first one who talked about the structure of plays and how they did, sort of a general structure. And it's basically where you have a exposition, where you sort of introduce people to what's going on. And then there's an inciting incident where the action gets started, and you have the rising action. It gets more and more complicated, more and more intense. And then the crisis being all the obstacles that the hero has to overcome in order to save the day. And then the climax of the experience, right, where one and only one thing happens. Either the hero saved the day or didn't save the day. Either the boy got the girl or didn't get the girl. Either the customer had a great time or didn't have a great time. That's that climax of the experience. But then it's not show's over, ride's done, go home. You gotta bring them back down again. And that's the fall in action, where you see the consequence of that climax play out over the characters. And then finally, the denouement. The denouement, the French word for unraveling, where you tie all of the plot threads together. So all great experiences need to have that level of dramatic structure that rises up to a climax and comes back down again. And it's not always easy to think about those 7 stages and exactly lay them out in your business. But there's a model that we use. It started with the Dobbin Group in Chicago, and we changed it a bit. But it's basically, we call it the 5E model. And it's it's enticing, entering, engaging, exiting, and extending. Right? 5 E's that provide a dramatic structure is enticing. How do you entice people to want to come to your experience in the first place, knowing that the experience doesn't happen when they actually show up, right? It's when they decide to come, when they think about coming, when they're on their route there. That's when the experience begins. So entering, what's the first impression? What's the first thing that happens? That's that inciting instance says, okay, now I'm here, now I'm off. Engaging, of course, you want all 5 stages to be engaging, but engaging is the core part of the experience that rises up to that climax and comes back down again. And then the exiting, right? What's the last thing that happens? People often remember the last thing that happens, better than anything else, but perhaps the climax. And then finally extending. How do you extend that experience through time? How do you contact them afterwards? How do you give them memories? How do they take pictures and share them on Instagram or Facebook? There are many different ways to extend that experience, which hopefully means that it cements the memories. They talk about it to others who also want to have that experience, and they want to come back again themselves. right? So that, that's how to think about theater. I actually learned about Freytag diagram from a wonderful book, Computers as Theater by Brenda Laurel. I met her once and talked about her unfortunate as, that computers is theater, and she didn't take kindly to that. But anyway, it's, Computers as Theater, where she talked about Freytag diagrams and introduced me to them. And she also made the basic point that we need to consider computers, right, that you think of them as theater as well, that it's not an interface that you have, but computers are a medium through which you have an experience. And this was written long before we had apps and that sort of thing. But theater applies to any experience, even if it's a purely digital experience, even if it's an app that you're having or a virtual experience you're having in a virtual world somewhere, whatever it is, you need to bring that theater into it. Right? Because again, Stan, work is theater.
Indeed it is. And thank you. Now, listener, wasn't that better than an interview where I just kind of blurb on and ask silly questions? See, this is what we love about interesting ideas. I shut up and listen to interesting people along with you. Now, let me just tell you something. This was about 15 minutes. And I used to say to people, whenever you make a sales pitch, help entertain and engage them and teach them so that you have the right to ask for a $200 check just for the sales pitch. Of course, nobody will ever do that. But if you will take this presentation, which he worked hard on, and play it 3 or 4 times, and actually that's the way you learn something. What Joe just gave you in 15 minutes, you should write him a check for $500. But none of you will, but he deserves it. Okay?
And well, if anybody does, Shan, I'm sharing it with you.
Very good. Well, let me tell you, what Joe did is he put about 25 years of work into 15 minutes, and that's how good he is. And you need to play this back because truly, I mean this. Work is theater. Every business a stage. All business is show business. So it's your turn in your town and you're on. And you've got to think that way every day. Say amen, Joe.
Amen, Stan. Amen.
Thank you so much, Joe. This has been great. And we thank you for listening to Interesting Ideas. And we'll be back with more good stuff like this. So stay tuned. All the best and blessings to you. And bye for now.